At this time, I want to invite you to join in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Sumter School District September 27, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting. This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public, but is limited to first come, first served seating due to COVID-19. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board meeting and Sumter School District's Facebook page. Mission. The mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. Vision. The Sumter School District develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively to society. Our board members are Dr. Barbara Jackson, Area 7 Chairwoman, Dr. J. Frank Baker, C8 Vice Chair, Dr. Darrell McGaney, Area 5 Clerk, Mr. Brian Alston, Area 1, Mrs. Cheryl Ray, Area 2, Mr. Matthew McLeod, Area 3, Dr. Johnny Hilton, Area 4, Dr. Gloria Rose Lee, Area 6, Dr. Sean Reagan, Seat 9, Mrs. Robin Mills, our Deputy Director of Installation Support from Shaw Air Force Base representative, and she's joining us virtually. Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, our Superintendent, Mrs. Amy Hanson, our Administrative Manager, and Ms. Connie Jackson, attorney with Halligan, Mahoney, and Williams. This meeting is called to order. Good evening to our in-person and our virtual attendees. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome you to this first meeting of the fall season. This is certainly an active time of the year for many of us. I want to remind us to take the necessary steps to keep ourselves and all those we love and care for safe and protected. With no objection, the agenda stands approved as written. Dr. Hilton?
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to propose actually 2 amendments to the agenda, if I may, please.
Okay, first, please.
One amendment to the agenda is to provide for some discussion and an action item regarding the mandating of masks for students and employees in the Sumter School District.
Second.
Okay, we have a first, the motion and a second to include discussion of an action of a mask mandate in Sumter School District due to the emergency nature of COVID-19?
Yes.
Okay. You've heard the motion. Are there any discussion? If not, please vote. Cast your vote.
Oh. So you supposed to vote?
Motion passed.
The motion passes. And Dr. Hilton, you said you had another motion?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I would like to move that we, amend the agenda to include some discussion regarding the Teacher Advisory Council meeting that was held on September the 16th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, heard the motion. Are you ready for discussion?
Want to repeat the motion?
The motion is to amend the agenda to include discussion of teacher concerns as expressed at the September 16th Teacher Advisory Committee meeting that was shared with trustees. Are there any discussion of this? If not, please cast your vote.
The motion passed.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, we're down now to the announcements.
And with those, just you want to just pass, with no objections, to pass the agenda with those two motions.
Okay,
Just to make that fun.
all right, if there are no objection, we pass the agenda with those two additions to the agenda that was just stated.
That's it. We'll move on to announcements.
Okay, so now we're down to the board communication. Trustees, are there any items for announcement as far as board communication is concerned? I would like to say is that I'd like to remind the members of the Citizen Advisory Committee of the Thursday, October 14th meeting at 6 p.m. The location is to be announced or determined. Okay, we're now down to the facilities.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I had something. Dr. McGaney and I attended the State School Board Regional Advocacy meetings, and we both felt like there was a lot of valuable information given, so I have shared that with Ms. Hanson, and she's going to scan it and email it to everybody, especially those of you who are delegates for the meeting in December. It's a nice summary of the resolutions they're going to consider, and then also on some of the laws that are affecting us as a school board. So just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ray, and Dr. McGann for attending the conference to represent us. We do appreciate you and your attendance. And thank you for bringing the handouts back and y'all sharing that as well. Okay, do we have any other announcements? Well, hearing none, we'll move down to committee reports. I guess I went a little ahead, I apologize for that. And I did mention the Citizen Advisory Committee, and that should come under committee report. And we're now down to facilities. Dr. Reagan.
We don't have a report tonight, however, it's just a reminder that the Facilities Committee meeting, as well as the subcommittee members, will meet this week, Wednesday, September the 29th at 6 o'clock p.m. here at the district office.
Thank you, Dr. Reagan. Finance Committee, Mrs. Ray.
No report, but the Finance Committee and the Subcommittee will meet October 4th here at the district office at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ray. The Policy Committee.
There's not a report, but I will ask that the administration and members of the policy committee look at your calendars in the weeks to come so we can schedule a meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. All right, the Transportation Study Ad Hoc Committee, Dr. Baker.
Thank you. Our meeting is scheduled for this Thursday at 6 o'clock here at the district office.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Baker. If we don't have any additional committee reports, we'll move down to our legislative delegate.
I'm having a little difficulty hearing, you might want to speak a little closer into the mic.
Okay. We will move down to our legislative update. Dr. Hilton,
No.
Do you have any information to share?
No report at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hilton. All right, we're now down to our superintendent's report. That's the next item on our agenda. And Dr. Barnox, please proceed with the items listed under this section, please.
Yes, ma'am.
You see if it's on school district realignment, school board update 3.4.
Don't have that.
What is it?
3.4.
The Sumter School District realignment, school board update 3.4.
For Mr. Crawford, yes,
Mr.
we're welcoming
Crawford.
him now, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Baker, that's under you, right?
He'll be joining us virtually.
He is
All right,
here.
that's the 3.4, the
Yeah.
realignment
I
school
just want
board
to share
update.
you how to talk like directly into the microphones, or they won't be able to.
Pull, see if you can pull it a little closer, grab the base and pull the base over.
Are we supposed to push this button down when we?
No.
It should be green.
It's green, as long as it's green. Okay, is Mr. Crawford with us?
He is with us.
We will now hear from Mr. Crawford on the Sumter School District realignment update. Thank you, Mr. Crawford, for being here with us this evening.
Yes, ma'am, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to give you an update. We have been working feverishly since we last spoke in preparation for this week. We have our second committee meeting on Thursday, the 30th, at 6 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just do a couple review points here. So we are just at the very beginning of the process, and there is a long ways to go here. But like I said, we have prepared for this second committee meeting this Thursday, the 30th. The agenda for this meeting is we plan to bring 2 draft options to present to the committee and just really start to get some feedback and get some conversations going. We fully expect the draft options that we have drafted to be modified and to be updated, or maybe new maps created. The most important thing to remind you and the board and also members of the public as we get into this, that everything is going to be draft all the way through the course of the study. So we're here in September, but we're working all the way through March with meetings to look at options and finalize options. And so as we share drafts this Thursday, that's where emotion will start to come into play. We will start to get comments and feedback from people who like or don't like a particular option. And all I keep saying to members of the public and also committee is, don't get too excited about scenarios this early. And as we work through it, we are just starting. And this phase of the process is not trying to figure out the best plan, but trying to figure out a series of options that we can take to the public in December. And so we have this meeting this Thursday and 2 more committee meetings to prepare for a public information session in December where we share options. So with that said, we have drafted these 2 options, and we are planning to share these on Thursday and get into really details and specifics about them. But I wanted to go ahead and give the board just a little preview of the maps that we have drafted, and then we'll really be diving into the details and numbers and things like that this Thursday. So as we started working through the maps and looking at the zones in your school district, we were looking at ways to balance utilization and also try to resolve some of the transportation issues that exist and try to get students closest to their home. So we have drafted these options looking at transportation and utilization as really some of the more of the primary focuses in these first 2 maps. knowing that we have to look at all the other criteria as we work to modify these drafts and build maps that best meet your criteria as a whole. So I'm just going to toggle on, these are your current zones, and I'm just going to toggle on the draft elementary option 1. And because this is your county is so large, I'm going to show it as a county level here, and then I'm going to zoom into the city area because there's a lot going on within the city as well. But if you look at option 1, and I'll toggle on the current zones and back to option 1, you can see that we have moved lines, getting rid of some of the more extreme distances that exist in some of the zones, like in particular, R.E. Davis wraps around the Chestnut Oaks area. We've shaved off some of the area of R.E. Davis that stretches far away from it and sending it down into schools that are in the city. We've also made some adjustments in between schools in the north and really for the looking at the county from some of the outskirts of the county, those are where you're going to see most of the changes that we're looking at drafting right now. Option 2 does a lot of similar things, but it does have some different looks for areas in the north, Rafting Creek and Oakland, High Hills and Shaw Heights, and those schools. And so, you know, these are basically maps that we have drafted and just really kickstarting the conversation with the committee. I'm going to go into the city area and just look a little bit at your current zones here in the city. And this is something that we've identified. You do have a couple of enclaves, a small one for Alice Drive, and you've got a satellite area over here for Kingsbury. So we were looking at what could the maps look like with transportation again and utilization in mind. If you look at draft option 1, we've drawn, gotten rid of some of the enclave and sent some of the area in the south that was a satellite into Wilder Elementary, where currently it feeds into Kingsbury. And then also option 2 is just another look that we have drafted to take a look and see what it would look like. This is one where the zone line, some of the areas around Cherryville are feeding into Alice Drive, and then Wilder looks more a different shape between Wilder and Kingsbury. And again, these maps are all things that are going to be subject to change, and really we're looking forward to the public and the committee giving us input. You'll also see other changes that we've made on the western edge of the city, sending some students into the city where currently they may go to Cherryvale, and looking at utilization and also distance as we do this. I'm just going to show you some preview of the middle school zones. So these are your middle school zones, and currently the middle schools do sort of wrap around the city as they currently are because of why, after the consolidation zones were never evaluated. So it's understandable that, you know, we're here to take a look at that. If you look at option 1, you can see in option 1, we did some of the similar things with Davis and sending some students to Chestnut Oaks Middle School that were on the far outstretches of Davis. And then we've also done some adjustments here between Furman and Hillcrest to try to get students close to their home, but also balancing utilization. And if you look at option 2, and I'll toggle on 1 and 2, they also have different looks. Basically, different areas are feeding into different schools to balance that utilization, but also focus on transportation distance and students impacted and feeder patterns and all of those components. And then finally, the high schools. Let's take a look at high school. And this is one where we see the most extreme cases of students further away from their home school than where they currently go. Again, the nature of the consolidation and the zones not being evaluated post-consolidation. But in the high school options, just looking at one draft option, you can see that we align the zones more to where areas on the west end are feeding into Sumter, and areas on the east end are feeding into Crestwood, and then the south are feeding into Lakewood. We also, looking at the second option, there are some differences in some of the far out stretches of the county and feeding them into one or the other school. And I'll go into the city area, so just to take a look at the city here to see how that may look in these two draft options. So in looking at this, this is currently the current Sumter High School zone. And if you look at option 1, you can see it does look a lot different than what they currently look like. And that's basically looking holistically as the county and the city as a whole, and looking at all of our factors. So you can see that the city does get, there's impacts across the board of schools, but the city does change shape substantially. And if you look at high school option 2, it's another alternate look for high schools. So again, what I want to stress is that we really look forward to working with the committee this Thursday, diving into these. We're going to preview these maps and look at detail at the maps and look at where the lines are going, looking at statistics and data. And really the objective this Thursday is I want to get the sort of the gut reaction of some of the group and the committee, and then also hand these over to them and let them look at them and start thinking about ways that they can be modified or improved or other options to be drafted. And that's about all I have for tonight, other than, just saying we look forward to seeing you guys this Thursday at 6 p.m. and really take a really detailed dive into these maps that we have prepared for you.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Crawford? Yes, Dr. McGinn.
Yes, Mr. Crawford? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, sir.
Yes, I heard your presentation, and with all due respect, it makes absolutely no sense to me when you say that the kids that's in the rural area, they're going to be shifted into the city. That sounds like to me longer transportation bus rides. You're shaving off R.E. Davis and you're bringing them into the city. I need you to explain that to me again. How is that? I know it's a draft, but I am totally confused. Please explain that part about the shaving off of R.E. Davis again for me, please.
Yes, sir. If for the R.E. Davis area, if you look at it and look at how the road network is configured in the area that we're considering or that we have drafted, the roads travel efficiently into town, where versus now they do kind of go across a couple of roads to get to R.E. Davis. So we're from our perspective and looking at it, it's we have looked at areas that to go closer to their home. But again, these are things that I would just caution not to get too concerned about the way these are shaped. These are the kind of things that we want to hear from the committee and the board where you may have concerns, and we will look at them and evaluate them to make sure that we continue to draft options that best meet the needs of all children in this county.
I'm still confused. However, I won't get excited because this is a draft. However, I will say that all I heard was that kids will be shifted to Chestnut Oaks, but then again, I hear in one breath and then out another breath, we're getting them closer to their home. So that's where I'm confused at, but I won't get excited. My next question is parental involvement, community input. What's the percentage of community that partaken in this study, the last meeting you had, from the rural areas?
I'm sorry, but can you repeat the question?
The parents, the citizens that live in the rural areas, when you did your presentation last time you did your presentation, which is supposed to be for the community, can you tell me the percentage of parents that participated in your social media, when you did the social media last time you did your presentation? Was it a high percentage of rural community parents that participated? I need the percentage of those parents, because when it's all said and done, all the community, all the rural areas gonna be bombarding the board members saying they don't know anything about this. So my question is, I need to know the percentage of the rural stakeholders that participated in your study.
Well, we had a public information session on the 14th that you mentioned, and we had about 30 people attend that session.
Overall?
We didn't, I'm sorry,
A total of 30 overall participated?
in the public information session, yes, sir.
There's a breakdown in communication in getting the information out to the rural areas then. That's what this tells me. This tells me a lot of the community, rural communities, doesn't know anything about it, because all I hear in the presentation is pushing them into the city, pushing them into the city. So my recommendation at some point is you need to meet in person with these rural communities, these stakeholders. That's a recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, and by no means are we trying to exclude any community and working with this. We are focused on the objectives and our criteria and trying to develop an option that best meets the needs of all children. And if there is something that is drafted that does not meet that, or if there are any challenges or issues with that from any regard as it relates to the criteria, these are the things that we want to hear from. And so I would I appreciate your comments, and I am looking forward to hearing what you have to think and everybody else has to think about these maps. And I know that they're not going to be perfect, and I know that people are going to be not like them. Some people may like them, but I really don't know what feedback I'm going to get yet. And so I'm coming in with this with an objective point of view, looking at it, and I'm looking forward to working with all members of the public and anybody that we can reach out to. We need to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crawford. Are there any other questions for Mr. Crawford? Dr. Baker, do you have any follow-up?
None, ma'am, and again, just remind everybody, we'll have a meeting Thursday at 6 here at the district office.
Okay, yes, Ms.
Are the draft options that Mr. Cropper shared, are they available now for us to view on the website?
His plan was to brief the board first, and if I understood correctly, he was going to post them after the board was briefed, but, Mr. Cropper, did you hear Mr. Austin's question?
I'm sorry, I did not hear it.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking into the mic. His question was, since you briefed the board tonight on this draft proposal, will that now be made public on the website?
We plan on publishing the draft options on the, our plan is to draft and put them on the website on the day of the meeting on Thursday. That's really our goal is to get them on there on the day of the meeting so that everything is available for the public that day.
Okay, all right, thank you. Does that answer?
Yes,
Mr. Austin?
sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, Dr. Hilton?
Mr. Cropper, is it not possible to get them on the website before the meeting so that people might have a day or two ahead of time to look at the website and see the draft, so that when they tune into the meeting, they would be better prepared to ask questions or make comments? That would be
Yes,
better.
I will look and see if it's possible, if we can post things early. This Thursday's meeting, I know, although it is a public meeting and the public is welcome to observe these meetings, the intent of the meeting on Thursday is to work directly with the committee and focus on options. This upcoming Thursday meeting isn't structured to where we do a Q&A with the public and have comments from the public. Where we have a public feedback form where they can provide input that we will continue to track. But this Thursday's meeting is focused on having a dialogue with the committee. But I will see if we can get things published sooner prior to that committee meeting.
Thank you, I understand, thank you.
Okay. Any other additional questions? If not, I'd like to say again, Mr. Crawford, thank you so much for being with us this evening and providing the update that you had. If there are additional questions, we will reach you through Dr. Baker or our point of contact here at the district office. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're ready for the superintendent's update report.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and would you please just go through all of the items listed under your section?
Yes, ma'am. So good evening, Dr. Jackson, Chairwoman, Vice Chairman, Dr. Baker, members of the Sumter School District Board, and members of the Sumter School District community. Item 4.1 is from the Office of Academics, and it is the amended textbook adoption. And at this time, I will ask Dr. Jada McLeod to provide us with information as it relates to 4.1.
Good evening, Chairwoman Jackson, Vice Chairman Dr. Baker, our clerk Dr. McGaney, Superintendent Martin Knox, members of the Board of Trustees.
Dr. McLeod, I'm sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
you're having some we're having some issues with hearing you. Your device sounds like robotic-like. So I don't know if there's something next to it interfering.
Only thing I hear is the air conditioning. Maybe if I cut it off, that will help. Is it continuing?
It is.
She may need to log off and log back on.
So maybe you may need to run over to Dr. Law's office and allow him to use his device and then try to figure out what's wrong with yours. Or next door to Ms. Carnes. And then log yours off while you run over to Ms. Carnes' office and then log it back on.
I'll do that.
Ms. Carnes, can you speak to make sure it's not something in that part of the building?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you. Dr. McLeod, it's your device or something, okay? So we apologize for the technical difficulties.
Okay, I'll try again. Good evening. Is it better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Here tonight for the amendment for the textbook adoption, I have Dr. David Laws. He coordinates textbooks for us along with Mr. Richard Phillips, who is coordinator for PE and health. And I will have them elaborate on the amendment while I try to boot my computer back up. I'll pull my laptop also to see if that helps.
Greetings, board members and the superintendent. Protocol has been established. The reason we brought the list back before you again is because in the process of entering approved textbook adoptions, there were other selections. Even though there were only one option, there were other selections available to be adopted. So we wanted our teachers to have all of the new resources. So I amended the list that was approved at the previous board meeting. So for official purposes, I present to you, to Dr. Martin Knox and to the board, the revised list to include the previous books as well as the new books that were available for adoption.
Are there any questions for Dr. Laws. I think she said Dr. Laws as well as
Mrs. Phillips.
Mrs. Phillips. Are there any questions for either one of the gentlemen, Dr. Laws or Mr. Phillips? Okay, hearing none. I guess we're still waiting on Jada.
No, I'll go ahead and start,
Okay.
because she looks like she has.
It's difficult to still.
Ms. Carnes, is, Dr. McLeod in her office, or you can't tell, is she ready to log back on?
I think she's trying to set up her laptop to see if that helps.
So while she's doing that, do you mind, Dr. Jackson, if we go to 4.3 and then come back to the presentation?
That's fine.
That's okay. So at this time, we'll jump to 4.3, the Office of Finance, just so that we can maximize our time. At this time, I would ask Ms. Miller to begin presenting for us if she's not having technical difficulties.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. All right, we are going to start with the June 30th information. Good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Barbara Jackson, Vice Chairman Dr. Frank Baker, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. We have the June 30th, 2021 revenue and expenditures for the general fund as of September 23rd, 2021. The projected revenue was adjusted by $35,000. Some of the larger adjustments were the local tax revenue, Revenue 3840 manufacturing reimbursement were decreased by $332,000 as a result of posting the year-end tax receivable and deferred revenue that is required for our financial statements. And then the revenue code, let's see, this one is revenue code 1320, school tuition LEA was increased by $65,000 related to a proviso. Legal settlements, which is revenue code 1994, was adjusted by $103,000. That was an increase based on a settlement and insurance proceeds. And then lastly, revenue code 3825, new school tax credit, was increased by $203,000 as a result of the revised information received from the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. Again, that was a $35,000 adjustment to the total projected revenue, which brings the total projection to $129,171,894. Next, moving on to page 2, we have increased expenditures by $2.5 million. We have increased the other financing sources by $592,000, and then we have decreased the transfers out by $732,000. So starting with the transfers, we were able to reduce the amount transferred to the food service fund as a result of additional COVID-19 funding received by the food service department, which was to help offset the loss that the fund sustained for the year. Therefore, we did not have to transfer as much from the general fund. Then the other financing sources increased as a result of the indirect costs that we were able to record, which was a result from grant funding and grant activity as of June 30th, 2021. Now moving on to the expenditures. We have evaluated our expenditures and solidified the change in the fund balance for the fiscal year. The non-payroll expenditures came in under budget by approximately $2 million. The majority of these budgets are managed at the department and school levels. The interest and principal line items are managed by the Office of Finance and were adjusted with the year-end audit entries. The largest fluctuations were in the following expenditure codes. 410, supplies, was adjusted by a decrease of $492,000. Interest, which is code 620, was decreased by $202,000. 399, miscellaneous purchase services, was decreased by $152,000. 313, pupil services, was decreased by $149,000. 470, energy, was decreased by $130,000. 445, tech and software supplies, was a decrease by approximately $125,000. 323, repairs and maintenance, decreased by approximately $117,000. 660, pupil activity, decreased by approximately $108,000. 319, other professional and tech services legal, decreased by $80,000. 345, technology services, decreased by approximately $70,000. And then lastly, 610, redemption of principal, was a decrease of approximately $69,000. While we still do anticipate additional adjustments related to the financial audit for accruals as we continue to close out the year, we believe the amounts will not be material to the financial statements. And at this time, I'll turn things back over to Dr. Martin Knox.
So good evening again. As we've been discussing for the past 18 months, our staff have worked diligently in trying to provide quality education to our children during these challenging times. We have asked the patience of our staff, and I appreciate the patience of our staff, as well as to our board, as we continue to have the discussion regarding our retention stipend. And at this time, I'd like to share that due to the information that Ms. Miller just communicated, and based on information that was shared throughout the past 18 months, at this time, we're going to go ahead and make the adjustment as we have indicated by providing our staff with a retention stipend. As you know, we've used that language because we know that our staff has worked diligently. And so at this time, we're going to look forward to October 15th, where our staff who've been with us for the 2021 school year and the 2021-22 school year with a retention stipend of $2,000. That would be for full-time staff. For part-time staff for the 2021 and 2021-22 school year, for the part-time staff, they will receive a $1,000 stipend. And again, it's for those individuals who have been a part of the district for the past 18 months or the past 2 school years. While we recognize that all of our staff have been working diligently, and this is the closure of the 2021 budget, we also need to recognize those who just joined Sumter School District after July 1st. And at this time, I'd like to also recognize that we will be providing what we've classified as a loyalty stipend for our new employees at the rate of $1,000 for our employees who are full-time and $500 for those who are part-time. This would include our teachers, bus drivers, food services, and all those who provide those services to our students that we greatly appreciate. So again, I just want to thank our staff for their hard work and their diligence in moving forward. And I want to thank the board for trusting me and allowing me to provide this update and this support to our staff as indicated for the past few months. At this time, I will return the microphone back over to Ms. Miller.
Yes, ma'am. As Dr. Martin Knox has discussed, we have included this one-time retention stipend in an amount of $2,000 for full-time employees and $1,000 for part-time employees who are working for us, that were working for us during fiscal year 21 and remained with us thus far through fiscal year 22. The dollar figure for that retention stipend totals approximately $4.6 million. As stated previously, as non-payroll expenditures came in under budget, we used that to offset this cost of the retention stipend, and then we increased expenditures by $2.5 million. Please note that the district will cover the employees' FICA, which is the Social Security taxes, at the rate of 7.65%. Employees, however, will have federal and state withholdings from the retention stipends, meaning the amounts of $2,000 and $1,000 are gross amounts, not the net check amounts. The changes discussed will result in an overall change in the fund balance of $7,102,049, which will bring the projected fund balance as of June 30th, 2021 to $32,476,427. This balance is equivalent to 26% of our operating budget, which is just over 3 months of operating expenditures. This allows the district to remain in good financial position to be able to weather financial uncertainties potentially increase our bond ratings, which will allow for competitive interest rates on our annual debt issuance, all while ensuring our children's needs are being met and investing in our employees. At this time, I'll take any questions on the June 30th figures.
Are there any questions? Okay, Dr. McGaney?
Yes, Dr. Miller, am I hearing you correctly? That's every employee in the Sumter School District will be getting something?
Yes, sir,
That's every employee by October 15th.
with the exception of the superintendent, yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Are there any additional questions? Yes, Dr. Baker?
Just for clarification, Dr. Martin, so 2,000 for every full-time employee,
Yes, sir,
and then 1,000 for anybody who is part-time.
yes, sir, and those,
It
that's,
doesn't matter the classification of the employee.
it does not.
Okay, that's what I want to follow up on.
That's good.
But that's if they were working last year
Last year
and this
and
year.
this year.
Yes, sir,
And the new people that came on this year,
yes, sir,
gonna get 1,500.
yes, sir, 1,000 for full-time, 500 for part-time.
Let's give the administration a hand again. And thank you, Dr. Martinox, and thank you, Ms. Miller, for that fantastic report. That's good news.
And at this time, Ms. Miller, if you would proceed to 4.4.
Yes, ma'am. Moving on to the general fund revenue and expenditures as of August 31st, 2021. I have adjusted the total projected revenue by a decrease of $44,000. The majority of that relates to the revenue code we discussed last month, which was the 3992 State Forestry Commission. Moving down to expenditures, we have not adjusted the expenditures at this time. We will continue to review payroll expenditures and update projections as figures become more solid. As we continue to hire employees, salaries and benefits will continue to fluctuate significantly. Please keep in mind that the budget was created using a vacancy allowance of $1.5 million. That means those funds were removed from the budget. Additionally, the budget removed $2.4 million of salaries from the general fund to the ESSER 2 budget. That's a total of $3.9 million that's not included in the general fund budget that normally is. Additionally, with teacher vacancies we are experiencing, we have outsourced positions which do cost the district more than the budgeted salaries and benefits. At this time, I have not included the loyalty stipends for the new hires, as that amount will continue to grow as we fill vacancies and have changes in employment status. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Miller? Okay, hearing none. Martinox, do you have?
And Ms. Miller, if you would like to proceed with 4.5, the Office of Finance Capital Projects update, or effective August 31st.
Yes, ma'am. The board should have the capital projects from Fund 519 through 526 in front of them. Next month, we will also have Fund 527, as we did close on the fall 8% bond last week, and the monies were transferred to us this week. But right now, we have Fund 519 through 526. Are there any questions?
Questions for Ms. Miller? Questions for Ms. Miller? I don't hear any.
And at this time, I'd like to return back to 4.2 as I ask for permission to skip this item because we were having technical difficulties. Dr. McLeod, you want to try this again? You're muted.
Is it better?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Have to monitor and adjust. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. You may remember that last year, around this time, I provided the 2020 report card updates presentation, and at that time I stated the 2019-2020 school year was one unlike any other our district, state, and nation have ever faced. Well, in some ways it feels like deja vu, because again, for the 2020-21 school year, it's also been unlike any other we've ever experienced. As you may remember, Sumter School District began the 2020-21 school year virtually, and then we staggered the transition to the hybrid learning delivery model. And this slide shows the timeline that outlined our transition from that fully virtual to the hybrid to face-to-face instruction during that school year, 2020-21. So I have asked Dr. Moore to please present the updated information concerning the testing waivers, the expiration of some of these waivers, and other information that's pertinent to the accountability metrics for the 2021 Sumter School District report card. But before Dr. Moore begins, I was amiss with the technology issues. I have part of the academics team with me that will also be sharing information in those areas. And in addition to Dr. Moore, who's our Director of Testing and Accountability, I also have Dr. Laws, the Director of CTE and Instructional Technology, Dr. Emily Kempton, Coordinator of English Language Arts, Ms. Christine Carnes, Elementary English Language Arts Specialist, Ms. Carla King, Coordinator of Mathematics, Ms. Monica Pate, Elementary Mathematics Specialist, Mr. Richard Phillips, Coordinator of Science, Social Studies, Fine Arts, and PE and Health, and Ms. Tanya Addison, our Coordinator of Attendance. So at this time, Dr. Moore, if you would begin to share some of the waiver information.
Thank you, Dr. McLeod. And before we get started, on the screen you'll see just a view of what the items are we're going to cover in today's presentation. On the left side of the slide, on the right side of the slide, is just information on how to access the district report card, and this is available to the public, but we've included the instructions here for your viewing as well. Just a couple of memorandums that came out over the summer. On July 27th of 2021, the South Carolina Department of Education issued a memorandum to remind school districts of the expiration of specific flexibilities that were previously granted for the prior school year, 2020-2021, pursuant to Act 135. For the current school year, 2021-22, districts must resume compliance as it relates to accreditation, AP and GT teacher endorsement requirements, the South Carolina Department of Ed audits of districts, educator certification, and of course grading, ELA assessments for 3rd grade, food service choices for students, and seat time requirements. All of these flexibilities were provided by the South Carolina Department of Ed in the previous year, but in this current school year, these flexibilities will no longer apply. So that came out in July of 2021. Another memorandum that came out on August 3rd of 2021 related to districts providing information to the State Department. So that memo went out requiring districts to submit scores for both ELA and math from approved interim assessments for at least 85% of their 1st grade through 9th grade. This information would come from the MAP growth assessments for our school district. And so we are working to make sure that we provide that information to the State Department as required. As we dig into the report card, there is a disclaimer that you will see on some of the pages as you're clicking through. And it is important to note that the student performance results that are reported on our district report card are incomplete and that the results displayed in this year's report card should not be compared to those of other years due to the testing limitations that were imposed as a result of the pandemic. So we are going to do very few comparisons to what is in this year's district report card as it relates to last year. One of the things that this report card does show, and on this slide you will see a glimpse into the participation rates of our district for spring 2021 testing as it relates and as it compares to the state participation rates. In the second row, you'll see highlighted in yellow where our school district reported in at 73.4% participation in spring testing as compared to 87.9% across the state. We're going to look at part one of unpacking the report card, and the part one looks specifically at academics. There are 8 components in that part of the report card, and we're going to go through each one of them. We will share the data, and after the data for each part, we will come back with some strategies that we're using and putting in place to respond to the data. Part one is dealing with academic achievement. So this looks specifically at our student performance results as it relates to ELA and math on the South Carolina Ready assessment. Roughly 25% of our students were proficient in ELA, or English Language Arts, on the South Carolina Ready. Approximately 18% of our students were proficient in math on the South Carolina Ready assessment. And this slide shows you a graphic of where our district performed as it compares to the state performance. This slide shows you where our district performed on the end of course assessment results for English 1 and Algebra 1. Roughly 45% of our students scored a C or higher on the EOC assessments in English 1. Approximately 25% of our students scored a C or higher on the EOC assessments in Algebra 1. And this slide will show you in orange where our district performed as it compares to where the state performed in green. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Carla King. She's going to provide, and some other members of our office, to provide me with some strategies that we're putting in place for math.
Some of the strategies that we use and are currently using is, first of all, to focus on the social, emotional well-being of students, being positive, encouraging, and building relationships. Secondly, we want to be purposeful in goal setting, and that's being intentional with pre-assessments, looking at what students need through a non-deficit lens, that is what they know, and how do we move them forward. And finally, we're using ExactPath, Dreambox, Alex, Math Nation, and other available programs to assist. Ms. Monica Pate.
After the assessing and the purpose of goal setting that Ms. King talked about, the focused learning, we need our students engaging in equitable instructional practices that have proven effective. Instructional practices such as rich tasks that are relatable to students and promote reasoning and problem solving, using and connecting a variety of mathematical representations, meaningful mathematical discourse through number talks in the classroom, posing intentional, purposeful questions, both in whole group and in small groups, building procedural fluency from conceptual understanding, using number routines, and the concrete representational abstract model of instruction. And as we think about acceleration and not remediation, we want to encourage, elicit, and use evidence of student thinking. That's what it's all about, is getting our children thinking mathematically. And all of this can be done through guided math And that leads us to the next bullet. We need to support and ensure teacher clarity of the South Carolina College and Career Ready math standards and the aforementioned instructional strategies. And we will do that by providing videos and explanation to support teachers when unpacking the standards, by providing further professional development, both district-wide, for example, guided math and number talks, and for individual schools based on their specific needs. And by meeting monthly with instructional coaches and department heads to continue school support to be able to build the capacity of our coaches, teachers, and students. Ms. Carnes?
In the area of ELA, the workshop model of instruction is utilized to create print-rich literacy environments where direct instruction is delivered in many lessons and supported through collaborative and independent application. This model of instruction supports the social emotional needs of learners through building from student strengths and targeting support for students based on the area of needs identified through formative and summative assessment data. Students read and write in authentic ways that provide them opportunities to share knowledge and grow as a community of learners. District pacing guides and curriculum guides support instruction. Each lesson and engagements within lessons ensure teacher and student clarity. The video attached to this slide is a portion of training from the August professional development modules and provides an example of how to navigate our curriculum documents. Dr. Kempton?
Thank you, Christy. In addition to the pacing and curriculum guides, we support coaches and teacher leaders through monthly conferences and ongoing professional learning. Reading coaches at the elementary level assist teachers in providing literacy instruction aligned to the standards and expectations for literacy outlined in the school reading plan. At the district level, reading coaches are supported through ongoing professional development aligned to the district reading plan. Middle and high school English department chairs meet monthly for vertical team meetings to ensure alignment of expectations and instruction across the district. The last two improvement strategies concern AVID. 4 elementary and all middle and high schools are implementing AVID. AVID is a school-wide initiative that supports all students in building disciplinary literacy skills. Incorporating Wicker strategies across the disciplines involves intentional instructional decision-making designed to provide students opportunities to demonstrate what they know and can do with rigorous course content and to build skills and behaviors that support college and career readiness. AVID schools use the AVID Coaching and Certification Instrument, also known as the CCI, aligned with the school reading plan to engage in a continuous cycle of improvement. Our AVID schools are Lamira Elementary, Manchester Elementary, McAllis Springs Elementary, Rafting Creek Elementary, R.A. Davis, College Preparatory Academy, and all middle and high schools. Thank you. Dr. Moore?
All right, thank you. The next part of the report card within that first part, the academics, looks at preparing for success. And this looks specifically at how our students performed in the area of science as measured by the South Carolina PASS assessment as well as EOC assessments. The slide that you're looking at gives you information on how our students performed in the assessment of South Carolina PASS. And as you can see, we have 31%. We have 29% of our students that were proficient in science on the South Carolina PASS, as compared to the 43% that were proficient in science across the state. And as you can see, as in the previous slides, in orange you have how the district performed as compared to how the state performed in green. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Phillips. He's going to share some improvement strategies that we are putting in place for Science, and Social Studies.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Our way forward in terms of improvement strategies for K through 8 social studies and science focuses on 3 critical areas: standards, practices, and resources. We will continue to align the curriculum to the new 2019 social studies standards and the 2021 science standards, and we will use the backwards planning model to align the curriculum with the grades 4 and 6 SCPAD science assessments. In keeping with the intent of the K-12 framework upon which these standards are based, we will provide students with equitable and high-quality opportunities for phenomenon-based learning and sense-making. I've included a link for the introduction to the phenomenon-based learning pedagogy for those who would like more information. We will continue to facilitate professional development on unpacking the new standards and on developing and implementing best practices for student-centered, phenomenon-based, data-driven instructional methods. Finally, for K-8 social studies and science, we will provide rigorous, grounded in research curriculum resources designed to meet the needs of all students and teachers. Examples of some resources already provided include alignment guides, discovery education, gizmos, and My Avid resources. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And on the next slide, you have our end of course assessment results for last school year. Approximately 31% of our students scored a C or higher on EOC assessments in biology. That was compared to approximately 50% of students across the state scoring a C or higher. For U.S. history and the Constitution, approximately 31% of our students scored a C or higher on that EOC assessment, and that was compared to approximately 38% of students across the state. And on this slide, you'll see that information in orange for our district and in green for the state. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Phillips to talk about improvement strategies for students in grades 9 through 12 in social studies and science.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Our way forward in terms of improvement strategies for 9 through 12 social studies and science utilizes the same approach as K through 8. Again, we will continue to align the curriculum to the new standards and use the backwards planning model to align the curriculum with the U.S. History and Biology 1 EOC test blueprints as a model. We'll also emphasize the connections between the new college and career-ready standards and phenomenon-based learning. The word phenomenon in all its different forms appears in the K-12 science framework 194 times, which gives you an indication of the importance of this phenomenon-based learning approach. We will facilitate professional data development on data-driven best practices, such as formative assessments, and again, the backwards design model. We will continue the monthly department head meetings and 24/7 Schoology professional learning communities that we put in place to meet the needs of all teachers. Finally, we will continue to utilize Schoology Group's resource folders to invite teachers to provide a support library of teacher-created curriculum resources derived from their best practices. And I think now we're going back to Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. This next slide gives you information related to the kindergarten readiness assessment for the 2020-2021 school year. And as you can see on the slide, the percentage of students demonstrating that they were ready to learn on the KRA was 17% in our district, as compared to 26.8% in the state. You'll also see, let me go back. You'll also see in the domain area, the percent of students demonstrating readiness in the language and literacy domain was 22.1% in our students, and in the mathematics domain, it was 20.5%. The next slide deals with the NWEA assessments, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Carnes to give you some information on this assessment.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. The data for first and second grade students on track for success in English language arts and math are self-reported by our elementary schools to the South Carolina Department of Education each summer. Sumter School District uses data from our interim assessment, MAP Growth, and our MTSS screener, MAP Reading Fluency, to determine the percent of students on track for success. At the end of 2020-2021 school year, 25.8% of our second grade students were on track for success in English language arts, while 36.1% were on track for success in math. The data show that 41.9% of our first graders were on track for success in ELA, with 28.7% on track for success in math. As a point of comparison for students on track for success in ELA and math, we take a look at the percent of students in each cohort who were demonstrating readiness in language and literacy and math on the kindergarten readiness assessment. So the percent of students in our second grade cohort, which is currently our third grade cohort now, demonstrating readiness grew from 22.9 in kindergarten to 25.8 for ELA, and grew from 21.1% to 36.1% in math. Then when we continue to look at our first grade cohort, again now our current second graders, this cohort has also shown growth in both ELA and math, going from 20.1 to 41.9 on track in ELA and 19.1 to 28.7% ready in math. Dr. Moore?
Thank you, Ms. Carnes. This next slide talks about the access for English learners. This is assessment that we give to all of our English learners to determine if they are the level of proficiency in the English language that they have attained at the end of the year. When you look at this performance data, our English learners performed 6 percentage points below the state average. And we attribute this largely to the fact that the majority of this instruction occurred virtually for students, which is not the best format to support language development. Many of our students struggled in consistently attending virtual sessions in all classes, and almost half of our English learners did not report to schools to be assessed. A few strategies that we want to put in place to address these data issues would be to provide quality face-to-face instruction with all of our English learners, to proactively reach out to those students who may have become, and to those families who may have become disengaged. And we recently this school year shifted our part-time ESOL teacher at Sumter High School to a full-time ESOL teacher to make sure that those students at the high school level are supported prior to graduation. Speaking of graduation, the next slide talks about our graduation rate. And this particular slide shows you our 4-year cohort graduation rate, which has declined since the impact of the pandemic. However, last year our dropout rate, and this is the rate that measures the number of students who leave the district for any reason without transferring to another school, that rate went down. We also had an increase in our dropout recovery rate, and that rate measures the number of students who dropped out prior to graduation, but re-enrolled in a high school diploma granting program within 135 days of the next academic year. So although you may see a decline in our 4-year cohort graduation rate, because our dropout recovery rate increased, we were able to capture those students in their 5th year. And so many of them came back at a higher rate to graduate that 5th year. The next slide deals with college and career readiness. These graphs will show you the percent of students that we have in the graduation cohort who were college or career ready. And as you can see, that's 54.3%. Students in the graduation cohort who are college and career ready, which was 13.3%. Students in the graduation cohort who are college ready, which was 38.6%. And students in the graduation cohort who are career ready, which was 28.9%. You'll notice at the very top, and as you're looking through the report card, there is a disclaimer that the State Department is still awaiting the final vendor assessment files related to this data. And they should get that on October 1st, and at that point, these percentages could change based on those final assessment files. Here's information as it relates to the Ready to Work assessment, and you'll see that same disclaimer. The final vendor assessment files will be given to the State Department on October 1st, which could impact these percentages. But as you can see, where our students fell in orange, for those students who received the platinum certificate on the Ready to Work assessment, the gold certificate, the silver certificate, which is our expectation, and those students who received the bronze certificate. In orange, it will show our district, the numbers for each of those certificates, and in green, it shows the state. So you can see those comparisons for the Ready to Work assessment. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Laws, who's going to talk a little bit about the improvement strategies for career and technology.
Historically, students who are enrolled in CTE classes, which is career and technical education classes, perform higher in English 1, Algebra 1, and of course assessments. And they also have a higher attendance rate and graduation rate. So the goal for CTE is to continue to attract students who have a desire to enter the career and technical education field, to increase their awareness and their completion rate of our CTE program. So at the beginning of this year, we contracted with WLTX to develop a multimedia campaign to increase awareness of CTE courses and careers for all students, parents, and the community. And it's not just on TV advertisement. The campaign also addressed social media resources also. We also was able to revise our memorandum of understanding with Central Carolina Technical College to include dual credit courses and other pathways for our students to college. And also in collaboration with CCTC, we continue to provide opportunity for all high school students in CTE classes to earn the OSHA 10 and/or the microburst certification. So our students can earn these industry credentials that will ensure that they are ready and recognized as college and career ready. And finally, we continuously review and evaluate all of our CTE programs, and when needed, we revise those programs to make sure that we are aligned to current and future career opportunities for our students. Back to you, Mr. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Dr. Laws. And this next slide is looking at our state goals. And just a reminder, because we did not have report card ratings this year, the South Carolina Department of Ed did not include any state goals or other accountability type ratings or rankings on district report cards. So you'll notice in this section of the report card, under 2021, it has data and it's not applicable. And that is simply because the report card ratings were waived for an additional year and they were not given to any districts. Next section talks about our school improvement schools. And as you can see, there are two groups listed on this page, on this slide. You'll see the first group is our comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI schools. As a reminder, these are Title I schools that are performing at or below the 5th percentile of all Title I schools in the state. Typically, CSI schools are identified every 3 years, and each school receives technical assistance funds and is assigned a state-level transformation coach. We have 2 CSI schools in our district, Pocatello Springs Elementary and R.E. Davis College Preparatory Academy. Now, of course, because we have not had consistent spring testing, the South Carolina Department of Ed has frozen all schools on this list, as well as some upcoming lists that we'll discuss, until further notice. So the schools will continue to receive the technical assistance funds, as well as assistance from the state level transformation coach, until the South Carolina Department of Education decides to start reviewing and exiting schools from the list. Also listed on this particular slide, you'll see another group entitled the Additional Targeted Support and Improvement Groups, or ATSI. These are schools with at least one subgroup of students performing at or below the 5th percentile of the highest performing CSI school in the state. Like CSI schools, the ATSI schools are identified every 3 years. They also receive federal school improvement funds, technical assistance, and professional development from the South Carolina Department of Ed. And you'll notice for Chestnut Oaks, the performance of the English learners subgroup, as well as our special needs subgroup at the other schools, they were performing at or below the 5th percentile at the time that these schools were placed on this particular list. Now, these schools are also frozen on the list until further notice from the South Carolina Department of Ed. So they will continue to receive the funding from the our South Carolina Department of Ed, as well as technical assistance and professional development. And those 4 schools are Chestnut Oaks Middle School, Crestwood High School, Manchester Elementary School, and Sumter High School. And one other group of schools that we look at and that also receive funding as support from the South Carolina Department of Ed, these schools are called priority schools, and these are schools that are performing at or below the 10th percentile among all schools in the state. Normally, they're identified every 3 years, but of course, this list of schools is frozen as well. And so these schools will stay on this list until further notice. But they are provided with technical assistance funds and access to a lot of resources and professional learning opportunities from the South Carolina Department of Ed. The 4 priority schools that we have in our district are Furman Middle, Cherryville Elementary School, Croswell Drive Elementary, and Lakewood High School. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kempton to provide more information about the Palmetto Literacy Project.
Thank you, Dr. Young. The Office of Early Learning and Literacy at the South Carolina Department of Education has designed a multi-tiered system of support for schools based on the achievement of 3rd grade students on SC Ready. They divide their support into 3 tiers of instruction. Tier 3, the most intensive tier, includes schools where 50% or more of 3rd graders' score does not meet on SC Ready in the area of ELA. These schools are assisted by a literacy specialist from the State Department of Education weekly, and reading coaches attend additional training twice a month provided by the State Department. Our Tier 2 schools include schools where between 33.3 and 49.9% of 3rd graders' score does not meet. Our Tier 1 schools include schools where fewer than 33.3% of 3rd graders' score does not meet. Although students took SC Ready in 2021, the State Department decided to keep schools in their current tier status due to this disruption in instruction caused by COVID-19. Our Tier 2 and 3 schools must have their reading coach approved by the Office of Early Learning and Literacy each year and will receive LETTERS training over the next 2 years. And LETTERS is an evidence-based literacy professional learning solution that uses the science of reading pedagogy to provide teachers with deep knowledge and the essential skills to master the fundamentals of literacy instruction to apply and transform student learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kempton. We're going to look at part 2 of unpacking the district report card, and part 2 looks specifically at school environment. There are 4 components for this part of the report card, and we're going to start with student engagement. As you can see in this chart, it does do a comparison between how we performed in one year as compared to the year prior. You'll notice that the percent of students enrolled in high school credit courses went up last year from 8.7% to 18.5%. The percent of students served in our gifted and talented program went up from 16.8 to 17.9. The percent of students retained went down, and that was from 2.5 went down to 1.6. And you'll also notice our chronic absenteeism rate that is listed here. And I'm going to turn it over to one of our newest team members, Ms. Tanya Addison, our coordinator of attendance, to talk to you a little bit about chronic absenteeism and what this means on this district report card.
Good afternoon. As reported on the state report card, the chronic absenteeism rate decreased from 21.6 to 11.9. The rate of 21.6 is from the school year 2018 to 2019, and the rate of 11.9 is from the school year of 2019-2020. The chronic absenteeism rate, as it's reported on the report card, is 1 year behind. Chronic absenteeism refers to any student in grades K through 12 who misses 50% or more of the school day for any reason, and this includes excused absences, unexcused absences, as well as suspensions. The rate of 11.9 is a drastic increase from the prior year. During the school year of 2019 through 2020, as of March 16, after the governor declared a state of emergency, all of the students across the state were marked present after March 16. The chronic absenteeism rate that we will see next year on the upcoming report card, we can expect a higher rate because it will again reflect a full school year.
Thank you, Ms. Addison. And as you'll notice at the very bottom of this particular slide, it does give information on the results of the teacher, student, and parent opinion surveys. You will see the number of surveys that were returned by teachers, students, and parents. And you'll notice the percentages on 3 specific areas: the percent of teachers, students, or parents who were satisfied in the learning environment, those satisfied with social and physical environments at schools, and those satisfied with school and home relations. And so you'll see those percentages as it compares to teachers, students, and parents. This next portion of the school report card deals with classroom environment. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kumis to talk to you a little bit about the information listed in this part of the report card.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Again, this is also a chart that compares 2 years on a report card. The information is pulled from what's called the Professional Certification Staff database. We input all of our staff, their positions, and several other factors into this database, and this is where the information is pulled. You'll also notice that the state did not pull all of the information, this particular report card, from that database. So just to go over a few things with you, the percentage of the K-3 teachers who are certified in the Read to Succeed reading certification is up from last year from 97.9 to 98.0. The teacher attendance rate is new this year, and our district's teacher attendance rate was 95.6. The average teacher salary is up from $51,895 to $52,11. The percentage of teachers returning from the previous year to the current year is also up from 87.8 to 9.9. The percentage of teachers returning from the previous year, the 3-year average, is up from 87.0 to 88.7. The prime instructional time is also new this year at 86.4. The student-teacher ratio in core subjects is new, and our percentage was 30.4 to 1. The percentage of inexperienced teachers teaching core classes is up from 6.1 to 12.1. The number of inexperienced teachers teaching in core subject areas is up from 21 to 50. The percentage of out-of-field permits teaching in those core subjects, these are folks that we ask for a permit, they have to have 12 credit hours in that area for them to be granted the permit, is down from 3.5 to 3.1. And the number of out-of-field permits for teaching in the core subject areas are up from 12 to 13. Dr. Moore?
Thank you, Dr. Kumas. The next portion of the school report card, or district report card, deals with the student safety survey, and it pulls questions from parents that completed evaluations as well as teachers. And on this particular slide, you will see the responses, the total responses, or the total number of parents that participated in this student safety survey, as well as the number of teachers. You'll notice that the questions that we pulled specifically for the report card, one is, my child feels safe at school, and we're at 86.6% of the parents reporting that their child feels safe at our schools. My child's teachers and school staff prevent or stop bullying at school. That is 69.8% of our parents agree or strongly agree with that statement. As it relates to teachers, one statement asked them, I feel safe at my school before and after hours. 96.3% of our teachers agreed or strongly agreed with this. And the last statement, the rules for behavior are enforced at my school. 87% of our teachers either agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. And so this information is captured each year on the district report card, and it's reporting for our staff and our parents as well. Next portion deals with financial data. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jennifer Miller to give you some information about this portion of the district report card.
Thank you. The financial data on the report card is from fiscal year 2020. These figures were compiled from the professional certified staff file, the PCS file, the average teacher salary of $52,111, which was an increase as a result of the step increases. The percentage of expenditure for instruction and teacher salaries is obtained from the Insight report, which is compiled from the accounting data within our accounting software, and was down slightly from 53.9 to 53.3. The percentage of expenditure for teacher salaries is up from 37.5 to 47.6. The average administrator salary is down from the prior year. This figure was compiled from the PCS listing. Again, that's the professional certified staff file. 88,944 compared to 87,575. The percentage of students in poverty was compiled from the data within PowerSchool and was up slightly to 75.5, and it was 74.2. And then lastly, the per pupil expenditures are obtained from the Every Student Succeeds Act ESSA reporting tool. The data is submitted to the South Carolina Department of Education and is compiled from the accounting data from our accounting software, while personnel categories reported an increase from the prior year for the per pupil expenditures. The non-personnel categories reported a decrease, resulting in a decrease for the total per pupil expenditure per year. And now turning things back over to the Office of Academics.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's input. The Office of Academics has been participating in meetings and training sessions with the State Department to identify the standards across content and grade levels deemed essential for the progression of learning from grade to grade. The cycle of continuous improvement is reflected in the ongoing alignment of the curriculum, instruction, and assessment. During the 2020-21 school year, our office provided support through professional learning opportunities in content, pedagogy, and effective use of instructional technology resources. This support, along with the focus on unpacking the standards to ensure teacher clarity and identifying strategic acceleration strategies, will remain the focus throughout the 2021-22 school year. As you've heard from some of our content coordinators and specialists, this support includes observing and supporting teaching standards at the appropriate grade level rigor and providing standards and data-driven instructional coaching. We support teachers and schools in the use of formative assessments to inform daily instruction. Some of these efforts are focused on better utilizing current data and available resources to meet students where they are instructionally and individualize the learning paths. We also collaborate with teachers in their efforts to intervene early, reteach, and reassess as needed to monitor student growth. Additionally, support is being provided to identify acceleration strategies to help students meet these grade level expectations. Our office promotes the student-centric classroom that engage students in lessons by providing effective tools and strategies for face-to-face instruction and in preparation for a seamless transition to a virtual or hybrid setting if the need warrants. And our office continues to collaborate with the schools to provide additional opportunities for students to participate in higher level academic coursework, and much of this is through partnerships with our local higher education institutions, including 2-year, 4-year, and industry credentialing entities. This is a lot of information, but this concludes the overview of the 2021 Sumter School District Report Card. Additional updates as they become available and more detailed information will be provided throughout the 2021-22 school year. So at this time, the team can entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, Dr. McGaney, followed by Dr. Baker.
Yeah, I'm curious to answer the question. How different is this presentation from last year?
The actual structure of it is very similar because that is the structure of the South Carolina District Report Card.
So if we approve, if you approve or move forward with this improvement plan, will we see significant student achievement growth?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If you proceed with this improvement strategy, will we see significant student achievement growth?
That is our goal, and that's the efforts that the office is putting forth along with the schools to ensure that our students are growing. We are providing acceleration, not just remediation for these students, and providing more individual learning paths with our resources.
My next question is, prior to COVID, how were we performing?
Prior to COVID, we had seen improvements in many of the areas. COVID has really had an impact that we're working on now, but the impact is across the nation. And that is one reason why we are trying so hard to streamline the resources available and train the staffs to be able to use those to support our students.
Thank you for your presentation. That's the only questions for me.
Dr. Baker?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I have several questions here, and The first one is when we look at individual schools in the report, we see a lot of fluctuation between the achievement levels of the various schools. And my question is the staff looking at the differences in the individual schools' performances and seeing if you can come up with a strategy that will work better for those schools who are significantly performing lower than some of the other schools, for example, the middle, the elementary, and the highs in that particular group?
Yes, we are doing that in a variety of ways. Looking at, one of the first things we look at when we see a standard, for example, that is overall the district isn't doing well, we're looking into our curriculum to make sure that we have it outlined well enough where there is enough clarity, there are enough resources for teacher support, but then we go down into the individual school data to support them. And we are meeting with school leaderships to do that. The Office of Academic Staff is also meeting with the school leadership and having the monthly meetings with the instructional coaches and the department chairs to build their capacity also as we continue this continuous improvement cycle to control what we can control, that we do have control over, and really look at the root cause analysis and strategies for improvement, and then monitoring those strategies for implementation, ability of implementation, support to implement, and then also monitoring the student growth and if there needs to be adjustments.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, Dr. McLeod. And here's a follow-up to that. If we look at the ATS I schools, and for example, Chestnut Oaks' subgroup was the English learners. So what are we doing at the other schools that is working, but we're not doing at Chestnut Oaks? It's not working for these English learners. And I heard Dr. Moore say that y'all had looked at increasing the ESOL teacher time at Sumter High from a half-time to a full-time position. So are we zeroing in on these subgroups that are placing these schools in this category?
Yes, sir. When we speak and work with the schools, we talk about their subgroups, especially these that have identified subgroups. Now, they were identified 3 years ago. So the same year that we celebrated Chestnut Oaks coming off of priority was the same year they end up identified by that one subgroup. In the case of ELL, you're aware that subgroups, it depends on how many is in your student population, whether or not you have that subgroup. But we have one of the strategies for Chestnut Oaks with their ATSI funds is to have a paraprofessional that is dedicated in supporting them, that pushes into the classrooms with them and plans with the teachers and does organizes additional monitoring of student engagement, whether they need additional assistance in tutoring, if they're turning things in, if they need help, the families need help, if there's a language barrier, and then they work with Dr. Moore's ESOL department to provide whatever is needed and the outreach that's needed for those students.
Approximately how much time, FTE time, for the ESOL teacher is assigned to Chestnut Oaks? Is it half-time or 2 times a week, or?
Do you have it in front of you, Dr. Moore? I think it is half-time.
It is halftime. That particular staff member, it has multiple schools that they also serve.
Right.
And so, but Chestnut Oaks is one of the schools that a full-time person will serve, but they're not there on a full-time basis at this point.
But that's the plan, is to get them a full-time. And my last question, and I know this gets complicated, when we made R.E. Davis pre-K through 8, and we see R.E. Davis coming up with quite a few deficiencies here in our report card, have we been able to take a look at just that middle school group, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and particularly the 8th grade with our end of course scores on the Algebra 1 and English 1, how are those middle school kids performing? And I know it's hard to extract just that group since we've made it a pre-K through 8, but aren't we able to see exactly how those middle school kids are performing?
It's a little difficult this year because of our rates of participation, with some students still being virtual, and the state waiving that, and the fact that the 20% this year did not count towards their grade. In previous years, it was much easier to identify their performance and even follow their performance into their high school for their next grade level instruction.
Okay, and this really is my last question. AP scores, can you provide that for us? Not necessarily tonight, but at some point, maybe in the superintendent's report or briefing, you could provide the AP score information, which classes were tested, the number of kids tested, and what their scores were?
Yes, sir.
Alex, is that?
Oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I see Brian's hand. Brian?
Yeah, so this question is centered around the kindergarten readiness assessment, where we were falling behind in language and literacy as well as mathematics. And I know...
Brian, just 1 second, I saw the head shaking. Can you hear the question?
No, I'm sorry.
I can't hear you, Brian. Would you speak up a little bit?
Can you hear me now?
Say it again.
Can you hear me now? You don't know.
No, just say no.
It's probably this mic. It's on.
Talk a little loud, Brian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My question stems from the kindergarten readiness assessment, where we were falling behind in language and literacy as well as mathematics. What is the plan of, I don't know, a strategy in regards to early childhood education in the district?
Did you hear the question?
I didn't get the end of it. I heard the KRA.
What's the plan?
What is the plan for early childhood in the future?
Yes, ma'am. To address this issue so that our kindergarten students perform better on the kindergarten readiness assessment. As well as I think it plays into the schools that are on the Palmetto Literacy Project as well with our third graders. If they're falling behind or they're not prepared in kindergarten, then it's going to be an ongoing problem as they proceed in their educational careers.
Did you hear the question, Dr. McLeod?
If you're speaking about identifying them earlier to have preparation prior to getting to the KRA assessment, we're doing that with the expansions that we're going to have going on with our pre-K program, and we've done a lot of training over this past year since Miss Krill Ray joined the team, and we'll be expanding the day and the year to provide more time to ensure that we are catching those children early and providing more support and building that knowledge before they get into the kindergarten classrooms. And then from there, the KRA, the teachers take that information along with our NESFRA information and other resources such as math growth and the math fluency to determine the instruction that needs to be happening in those classrooms on a daily basis and adjusting based on that data. We're doing a lot of work to provide more individualized pathways for the instruction because our students are at so many varying levels in so many different areas, even within the same content.
Is that being deployed at certain elementary schools, or is it at every elementary school? And is there being special attention given to the Tier 3 schools on the Palmetto Literacy Project?
I think you're asking about the priority schools.
Gotta talk in your
Is
mic.
that correct? And the additional support for them?
When you were talking about the strategies being deployed to capture those children earlier, I was asking the question, is that at every elementary school, or is it at particular elementary schools, and is there any focus on the Tier 3 schools? Is there a heavier focus on those Tier 3 schools as well?
There is. Dr. Kenton, will you share with the priority schools the Tier 3 focus?
Yes, ma'am. With the Tier 3 schools, those are Rafting Creek and Willow Drive and Cherryville Elementary. Those schools receive weekly support from a literacy specialist that is provided by the State Department of Education. She comes in to work with the coach and improve the coaching strategies, and also she visits classrooms and works with the coach on how to coach those teachers. In addition to that, all of our Tier 3 schools will also receive training in letters, which is a science of reading program for early learning and literacy. And so all of the teachers K-3 in Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools will be trained over the next 2 years in the science of reading strategies.
I would just ask that as a board that at a future meeting that we have more discussion regarding early childhood education in the district.
Dr. Hilton has a question.
So the kindergarten readiness test is administered at the beginning of the kindergarten year, is that correct?
I'm talking to Mike.
I thought I was.
Did you hear the question?
Ma'am.
The question is, when the kindergarten readiness assessment is administered in the beginning of the year, what's the time frame? Or actually, he asked, was it administered at the beginning of the year? So I kind of answered part of the question. But explain the process for kindergarten readiness.
That's what, all I need to know is it administered in August or September of the kindergarten year?
Yes, it's required to be within the first 45 days.
Okay. So
traditionally, they have not let us bring the kindergartners in early. It had to be from the first day of school and be completed by the 45th day.
So if we're going to improve kindergarten readiness, that improvement has to take place before they enter kindergarten. All right, so it either has to take place at home or it has to take place in a 4-year-old class. Would you agree with that?
That's correct.
All right, so what percentage of our kindergartners are enrolled in our 4-year-old preschool? Ballpark.
It's hard to tell because this year has been so unusual, but I can get what this year's is and then what the average was before that. But we are working with the State Department to expand our CERDIP programs and extend our year with that. And we started with CERDIP last year to give them some additional support with the teachers. And Ms. Crowray has been very focused on working with those teachers to make sure they understand their curriculum. They have done lots of work with the breaking down those standards for those youngest learners. And they've also been working on setting up what a standards-based classroom looks like, how you manage it, the different workshop activities that go on in instruction and how you use those formative assessments and the observation to drive your next steps with the individual students. But I can get that data for you as far as the enrollment numbers.
But based on your prior experience, you know, an average over the last 5 years, what percentage of our kindergartners went preschool? 50%, 75%, 30%, 25%?
Well, some of that is self-reported. When the families come in to register their students, are you talking about the ones that have been in our CERTA program, or we have
Well,
other?
I think my point is this, is that we've got to increase the percentage of kids in a 4-year-old program in this district. If we hope to get our kindergarten readiness scores up, Brian, we got to have more kids in preschool, period. So then the strategy needs to be, how do we get more kids to come into the schoolhouse when they're 4 years old? Is it money? Is it programs? What is it that we can get our numbers of 4-year-olds in the school? And I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm just throwing that out, that's something we need to look at. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hilton. Are there any other questions for this Division of Office of Academics? If not, I'd like to say thank you to the Office of Academics. You've done a great, thorough job. It was a lot of information to share and a lot to comprehend. And we do truly appreciate all of your efforts for all that you've done to make this a wholesome presentation this evening. Thank you, Dr. I always say Jada, but you know, Dr. McLeod, for your leadership, as well as all of you that contributed to what you shared with us this evening. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Knox, for the report. Okay, that ends the superintendent's report, but I ask that you forgive me because I overlooked something. In our haste, I overlooked some of board communication, and that should be 3.5, the masks, that where Dr. Hilton amended the agenda, as well as 3.6, teacher advisory discussion. So at this time, I'm going back to 3.5 and 3.6, and we will listen to the discussion on the mask mandate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just feel that I personally have a moral responsibility to give us another opportunity to provide a safer environment for our students and our staff in the schools. That science says that vaccination, mask, and social distancing are the 3 best ways to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus. Consequently, it seems logical to me that we should do what we can to mitigate its spread, and one of those ways is to require our staff and students to wear masks. Now, I know that there is some concern about the proviso that says we may lose money if we do that. Other school districts across the state have chosen to mandate masks in spite of the proviso. We also know that the U.S. Department of Education has provided this Project Safe funds to Florida school districts following their state-imposed penalty for implementing COVID safety measures. And we know that the U.S. Department of Education has actually sent some money to Florida. So if money is our concern, then I submit that there are other sources of funding other than the state of South Carolina. And so that's what I have to say at this moment.
Thank you, Dr. Hilton. Any discussion? Ryan?
Yes, ma'am. I would just like to say, on the heels of the presentation that we just received, as far as our school district report card, if we want to see improvements or we want to see gains on the report card, we're going to need our students to be in school 5 days a week face-to-face for instruction. Right now, that's being interrupted because of close contacts and quarantining of our students and staff. And as Dr. Hilton alluded to it, science states that one of the best ways to mitigate the spread of COVID is to wear a mask. And so if we want to see our kids continue to succeed and we want to see an improvement on our report card, I would ask this body to support mandating masks in our schools so that we can ensure that our kids are receiving the best quality education, which is in-person instruction. If we want to see that continue, then this is the route that we need to go to ensure that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alston. Any other discussion? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
McLeod?
Looking at the item and the state today, the item was saying that our district numbers, COVID numbers, are decreasing, declining. Is that true? And the state said that COVID-19 numbers are declining in the Midlands public schools. And I appreciate what Mr. Alston was saying with the, our kids need to be face-to-face. They do. And that, but also on this presentation, with 75.5% of our students at the poverty level or below, losing funding, there's no telling where that funding comes from when we lose it. We can lose our meal funding, we can lose our transportation funding, we can use funding that we use to pay our teachers. We can, the lights can go out, and we don't have a school for them to even go to. Because not only do we not know where we will lose the money, and Dr. Hilton was saying that, we can get it from other sources, none of those guaranteed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McLeod. Any other discussion? I think I saw hand first and then come to you.
I was just going to say that the survey results showed that at least a third of our district was not in favor of a mask mandate. And when you have that number, how far are we going to go to try to enforce that? It's still going to be very difficult when you've got parents who do not want their children to wear a mask all day at school. So I think we have to consider that population also. And I'm not sure that adding a mask mandate is going to automatically make that much difference. We do have a number that are wearing masks now, but again, to try to force them would be very difficult.
Thank you, Cheryl. Mrs. Ray? Okay.
That was what I was going to ask. That's your
All right.
question.
Okay, Dr. Hilton?
It's true, 1/3 are opposed, but 2/3 are in favor. So, democracy says that the majority makes the rules, so to speak. The majority respects the minority, and then the minority should respect the decision of the majority. Now, that's not always the case, it is true. And I hear what you're saying, Matt, about the item did report that numbers are down week before last. But based on the numbers I saw this past week, I think this past week they're gonna be back up again. I'm just speculating, you know, we get information. It did look to me like week before last they were down, but it looked to me like last week, positive cases and quarantines were up. So hopefully they will continue to come down. Hopefully the numbers will go down. Statewide, nationwide, district-wide. But again, the best way to get them to go down is to, in my opinion, is to follow the recommendation of the doctors and the scientists. I went to the doctor this past week. The doctor and I had a discussion. He was wearing a mask. I was wearing a mask in the doctor's office. He said, it seems to me like it's very obvious that if everybody wore a mask in the schools and everywhere, our numbers would come down. That's just what my doctor said. I won't call his name. People keep calling him, saying ugly things to him.
Okay.
But back to my question is, how are we going to enforce that to make everyone wear a mask?
Well, Charleston says that if a kid doesn't wear a mask, they're gonna put them on virtual instruction. Send them home and put them on virtual, instruct them virtually.
But we have a limit as far as how many persons or students can go virtual, am I correct?
No, because the rule says you can go virtual if it's what's the word, it's an emergency, you know? So, I mean, I hadn't heard about Charleston losing any money or any of these other things.
That's where I was about to go. Within South Carolina, we talked about Florida. Do we have, Dr. Marnock, have you talked with any of the districts that have enforced the mandate? And would you mind just sharing, not giving names or anything, would you mind sharing some of that information with us, please?
So, you know, while I appreciate us continuing to make sure that we safeguard the learning environment, because it's very important, as you can see from performance data, the work that we're engaging in, it has had a tremendous impact on our children, both social, emotionally, and academically. And so as I have conversations with superintendents, many of them who have mandated are operating from their general fund. They are paying the salaries of their superintendent, of their principals, of anybody who's enforcing the mask mandate from their general fund balance or from their operating expenditures from previous years, not from this year. And so there are matters that are being addressed in terms of seeking monies to be returned as a result of the implementation of the mandate.
So, may I ask for clarification? Sure. So, has anybody told you that the state has contacted a superintendent and said, we want some money back?
Yes, sir.
And where was that, if I might ask?
I don't know, I think, maybe we shouldn't call names.
Yeah, okay.
So not.
And the way they're addressing that is they're paying out of fund, they're funding it from their fund balance.
Yes, sir, from the previous.
From previous year.
Yes, sir. And it's anyone who is enforcing or implementing, so that would include your principals, executive staff, superintendent, and then there are other individuals within the building who are enforcing. Those salaries are coming out of their fund balance from previous years.
Hey, Sean, I think I saw your hand, I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I know we're talking about the mask mandate inside of the schools, but can we get an update on how the mandate is going on the buses currently? Because I know there were a mandate for buses to require masks.
There have been some times where our drivers have put in awkward situations mandating the masks being worn, but for the most part, in my visiting schools and watching kids get on and off the bus and talking to drivers, most of our kids are complying. And I can say, and I don't have a statistical piece or I can't quantify, but I can say from a qualitative standpoint, more kids are wearing masks throughout the school day. And I believe it's because they're wearing it on the bus and they have to, and they're just not taking it off when they get to school. But more kids are wearing masks.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Alston?
And I believe Dr. Hilton said this during a previous discussion of this, that if the majority are wearing it, then the others will follow suit. That you're gonna have rule breakers and you're gonna have rule followers. And I think that's the whole point of the enforcement piece. If there's a rule in place, majority of our students are going to adhere to that rule. I don't think there should be any punitive repercussions for them for violating the mask, whereas a child is suspended or something of that sort, or sent home with their missing instruction. But the safety and well-being of every child is impacted by that child that does not wear a mask, and that's the issue that we're missing. And Dr. Martinox, you just alluded to that our kids are wearing the mask on the buses, so they're basically keeping it on all day. So if there's a mask mandate for our school buildings, then if a child enters the building with that mask on, they're more than likely going to keep that mask on throughout the duration of the day. And I think that's just from your observation with school visits that's a fact. Because the child is not going to take their mask off just because, oh, I got off the bus and I'm walking into the building, or I'm walking into the building without a mask. If you're seeing everybody else with a mask on, you're more than likely going to put your mask on or keep it on throughout the day.
I know that we said that the bus drivers are having a difficult time, but how are we dealing with the behavior issues of the students that are getting on there, and are we disciplining them, or we're just saying, here's the mask and sit down?
So it's happening in school as well. We're offering a mask, but we're also placing students in specific areas if they don't have a mask on. The drivers have masks to provide our children with, but from what I could observe, most of the kids have their own mask. But sometimes they lose them, drop them, and they need a replacement mask. And when I say that the drivers have experienced difficulties, I mean coming to the bus and the child doesn't have a mask, and we're already experiencing a shortage in drivers and delays in the buses, and now we have a driver who's trying to convince a child to put a mask on before he or she gets on the bus. If that child decides not to, there is no punitive action, because we can't leave children out on the bus stop. We can't leave them in harm's way. So they have to get on the bus and they have to come to school, and we cannot deny them education.
So they're not being suspended either?
They're not being suspended.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Lee?
Dr. Knox, those schools that you contacted and the ones that you said that are paying out of their general funds, have they had, are all their students wearing the mask? Are they having a pushback? I mean, I'm trying to figure out if they are mandating it and now they're paying out of their budget waiting on this money to be replaced. Are all the students wearing the mask?
No, ma'am. Okay. Dr. Hilton said it a few moments ago. What many of them are doing are sending students home, and they're expected to go to virtual learning.
With law enforcement, are they getting involved in helping to enforce the school's mandate that you know, during your conversation? Are there sheriff or city police department involved in assisting with the mandate?
If it's an SRO at the schools in those districts, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw Darrell, and then I'll go to Cheryl.
I was just wondering, have we considered consulting with city and county council to see about talking with them in regards to proceeding with where they are forcing a law, mandating a law, which would pretty much allow us to fit right into that? Or maybe if we haven't, maybe that's a suggestion that we can do in the near future, go that route. I just wanted to share that.
Well, I did mention it to, just in conversation with county council, and, you know, I think that they are pretty much like we are. I know that we've done the proviso, but I don't think that they've really taken a stance with anything. But I did hear that some of the law enforcement, other than through SROs, you know, you may not be able to get the support. I don't know whether we contacted the police department or anyone to see, you know, what kind of support we can get if we go that way. I don't think we've contacted them for that, but that might be an option as well. Okay, I think I saw Cheryl hand next, and we will entertain one more question, and that will be Brian. And we'll try to move on to the next item.
Just from our report card report, we saw what going virtual does to our student learning. And sending students home to have to do their academics virtually is going to impact those individual students. And I also want to know about how many kids ride buses, and then have you seen the same mask wearing from middle school and high school as maybe, I don't know what schools you've been in to observe, but I was just wondering how the older students were handling the mask.
I would like to say that qualitatively, at the middle school, I see more masks, and at the high school, I see more masks. The concern with the elementary is, you know, again, they'll take them off, they're playing with them, they're coming off, they're popping, they're breaking. So it's not that, like, I can't share whether they're coming to school with them. I know that when I see them in the hallway, so like, Friday, I believe I was at a school, and they were eating lunch in the classrooms, and I watched them in the hallway take their trays to the trash cans that were strategically placed in the hallway, and they didn't have their masks on, but it was because they had just finished eating lunch. So I would say, just from my observations, they're more at the secondary level being worn. At the elementary level, they're playing with them more, and they're under, they're on the eyes, they're, you know, in different places. So I would say secondary is better managing.
Plus secondary could get the vaccine.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many students do we have riding buses?
I don't have that number, but I can get that number for you because it does vary from day to day and from daytime to afternoon.
And just one more question, observing staff. How are we doing on masks with staff, with the adults in the building?
I'm just processing the elementary schools that I visited Friday. Majority of the staff had on masks. But in most cases, the adults are not wearing masks. And just to share with you, I met with principals a couple weeks ago, and I also shared this with TAC, that if we have to inspect what we expect. And so, as a superintendent, I'm not coming into the school or in classes without my mask on. And I'm modeling for them what the expectations are. So I encouraged principals, when I met with them, to wear their masks, because if they're wearing their masks, then their teachers would most likely follow suit. And the same would apply for children. If teachers are wearing their masks and the leaders are wearing the masks, then children are going to want to wear the masks. So while I can't mandate it, I've just taken it from the modeling aspect and just doing professionally what's best, because like you said, the last thing we want to do is to disrupt learning for our children. It's been enough. Enough is enough. And so while we have more and more shields that are up because we've given them a directive at this point, and the directive came right on the heels of Labor Day, because I knew that with families coming together and sporting events and all those other activities, we would probably hit a plateau in terms of the numbers. Many of my colleagues actually did a 2-week shutdown in anticipation for the rise of the vaccine, and rise of the positive cases. And so the approach we took as a district is to mandate the shields on the desks district-wide. So we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure children are in school. And I'll just add another piece. We did, we're doing the campaign. Mask up, Sumter. We keep trying to push that message that the more we're masked up, the less disruptive it is to school. And I know for a fact we had parents come today where their children are on their 3rd round of being quarantined. We cannot continue to go down this path. And I actually asked Ms. Devine to stay on or to come on in case there were any questions from the nurses' standpoint. But we continue to try to find ways in which we can help mitigate the spread and to prevent having to quarantine our children because it is disruptive to the learning environment. It's disruptive to their peers. It's disruptive to the teachers who are continuing to try to plan. There are some teachers who've not had a solid class since school started. And so we're just trying to continue to figure out ways in which we can beat this thing. And so I will say in my plug now, mask up, Sumter.
And I appreciate your efforts.
let's help her out by mandating it.
Okay. Do we
That's
have-
what I say.
Yeah, just my
Okay.
statement. Has there been any conversations with school districts that are mandating masks, where they're utilizing their COVID pandemic federal funds to offset the cost of enforcement?
They are not touching any monies that have been allocated from this school year and or CARES, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. They're using their fund balance from previous years. They're not touching any of the money from this year.
But is that an option?
So those funds, because remember when Ms. Miller does the presentation, we have buckets that we are expected to use those funds for. The operations of the school is not, like for regular salaries, that's why we couldn't give the bonuses or what have you. We should not be using that money for general salaries unless there's an impact of COVID. And so if we're saying we're mandating the masks as a result of COVID, there's an impact, there's a possibility that we can lose that funding.
Okay,
One more thing, but we do have money in our, fund balance from previous years.
To run for 3 months,
Yeah, we have $30 million in the fund
for
balance.
3 months, yes, sir.
Which came from funds prior to 21-22.
July 1.
okay. Thank you for your discussion on the, for the mask. And let's go to 3.6, the teacher advisory, meeting discussion. I think Dr. Hilton, you asked to Linda then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, ma'am, thank you for this opportunity. In looking at the minutes from the TAC meeting the other week, there seems to be there's one theme that seems to be recurring that I wanted to touch on, which has to do with staffing. And we know we're short teachers. We know we don't have enough teachers. We know teachers are going out on quarantine, which exacerbates the problem. We know that because of this, teachers are covering classes for other teachers. We know that teachers are giving up their planning period to go and be in somebody else's class, either because that person is quarantined or because we don't have a teacher for that class or whatever. So, there are a lot of teachers across the district that are stressing because of this staffing issue and the quarantine issue and the covering the classes issue. So then, is there anything we can do which, can we streamline the hiring process? This is just what I'm hearing is that the hiring process is very cumbersome, and that we're in a situation where we need to streamline the hiring process so that we can put more people in the schoolhouse, put more teachers in the schoolhouse, put more substitute teachers in the schoolhouse. So that's one question. Can we look at the hiring process and try to figure out how to streamline it some sort of way? Then the other question is there anybody else we can bring into the schools to cover classes? Can people from the district office go into the schools and cover classes? Can people from the office in the school go help cover classes? And this may be happening, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there. Is that maybe there is some way we can provide help to the teachers and build some goodwill by saying, we're here to, superintendent can't cover classes all day, but superintendent can cover a class. And some of these folks that we've heard from tonight can go cover a class. And that might go a long way to make people feel better. We hear your pain, we feel your suffering, and we're here to do what we can. I can't stay here all day, but I might can help you out for an hour or an hour and a half. Every blocks, hour and a All right, so that's another thought, okay? And then the other thought is, I see where we're just now starting to pay for the paid teachers that are teaching classes beyond their 3-class load or whatever. They're taking on another prep, so to speak, and we're just now starting to pay them at their daily rate or their hourly rate, right? I'm right with that?
Yes, sir.
So that's about to start. But then the other thing is if I'm covering a class, I'm only going to get $15 an hour if I'm not teaching that class. Am I reading this right?
So there's a fine line there, because we can only use the monies that we're utilizing if it's as a result of the pandemic and it's over and beyond what that teachers or that paraeducators' responsibilities are. And what we didn't want to do is to say, okay, Ms. Ray has been teaching for 15 years and we're going to give her $5 an hour. And Dr. Hilton's been teaching for 25 years and we're going to give him $20 an hour. So it took a minute for us to come up with a way in which we can compensate individuals to help alleviate some of the things that you just shared. And so in speaking with several superintendents across just in South Carolina alone, some of them are, some of them aren't, because now we're getting into the dual modalities. And so what we tried to do is identify a rate that we could a flat rate that we would give individuals who were teaching classes and or covering a class. Because what principals had shared with me that we did not look at, when we have a vacancy that exists, and let's say Dr. McGaney decided to take on an extra class for a vacancy, we were compensating them. But we weren't compensating Mr. McLeod if he was covering a class because Johnny Hilton was absent. And so when we looked at the equitability of that, it's not right. So, Ms. Miller, yes, sir.
I understand that, but I would submit that $15 an hour is not enough. And I applaud you and your staff for tonight addressing the bonus situation.
Yes, sir.
But again, I would say that if I've got to give up my planning period, which is what I'm doing, and go cover somebody else's class, it should be worth more than $15. You know, we're talking about teachers.
Yes, sir.
You know, we're not talking about ditch diggers.
We're not.
And I'm not knocking ditch diggers because God knows we need ditch diggers, you know. But $15 an hour is just not enough for a teacher, is my opinion.
Question.
Okay.
Follow up.
All right.
Am I hearing you correctly? And I heard what Dr. Hilton said about anybody can cover classes, you know, district staff, individuals. When they do that, and they're operating in dual role, because that's what it is, they're being paid?
Yes, sir.
They are?
That's what we just talked about.
I think you're talking about if someone from up here.
District, I'm talking about
No.
district. That's what I'm asking.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
I'm picking up on Dr. Hilton's question. He said anybody can do it, even district. So when that happens, I mean, you just said that.
Yeah.
So I'm following up from that. So if district individuals cover classes and filling dual role, we have not been paying them?
No, we have not.
So why is that? Because that's one of the main complaints in this teacher advisory report that I look at. I see several teachers raise dual role, holding on, you know, they're doing one job and then have to leave and go do another job.
So
And they're not being paid.
Sure, so let me disaggregate that. When you were talking about district, I thought you were referring to district office staff going into schools and covering. They do not get compensated.
Okay.
When you're talking about teachers and paraeducators, because we're also talking about paraeducators who also are covering classes, and I'm grateful for them.
Okay.
Many of them are covering classes. When we're talking about those individuals, they are being compensated.
Okay.
Now, you're also talking about dual modality.
Right,
So if so dual modality is totally different from covering a class.
Talk to me about dual
I'm
modality.
getting ready to. So dual modality is when you have a teacher who's teaching children in person and children who are virtual, and we talked about that the last board meeting. When you have a teacher who's teaching two separate groups of kids without even having to differentiate their instruction, those teachers are to be compensated, and this is a guideline that's been set up by South Carolina Department of Education. If I'm teaching in a classroom and Dr. Baker is at home and Dr. Jackson is in my classroom, if I just record myself teaching, it's considered dual modality, and I must compensate that teacher for teaching both loads. That was something that was as a result of last year when many of our school districts went virtual. And then when we came back hybrid, we had teachers teaching what we call dual modality, children who were in their classroom and children who were at home. Now, we have some dual modality that's going on with students with special needs to service them, and so those individuals are being compensated. But we are not requiring everybody to do dual modality.
And what distinguishes the dual modality from the non-dual modality?
Teaching two groups of kids, some in person and some virtual.
Okay.
Simultaneously.
And when that happens, they are being paid?
Yes, sir. But we don't have it district-wide. We have it for a small population of students to make sure we're in compliance with our requirements under their IEP.
Okay.
But the piece that Dr. Hilton was talking about is, if I am normally supposed to have 4 classes, and I come in and I wind up having to teach a 5th class because all of a sudden Dr. Reagan is not coming in, and the principal needs to cover classes because we are short, then that particular teacher who's going to pick up Dr. Reagan's class is going to be compensated. And so there's paperwork that we have to monitor because we are using CARES, ESSER funds, if you will, to do so, and there's documentation that is required to utilize those funds for that. They have to put down their time, where they were, their social security number, their blood type, and all those other things that go along with it, so that we are making sure we're documenting the monies as they're being expended for those services and for an individual. So I do agree with you. Our teachers are worth more than that. But if you go into some of our schools, we also have paraeducators who stepped into the role. They may have been placed in a classroom for support, and they've actually taken over the classrooms.
They're worth more than that too.
Yes, sir. And
Pay
so,
the parapros more than that too.
and so
We paid them $50 an hour to teach summer school, didn't we?
we did. And so the other piece that goes along with that, made me lose my thought with that $50.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
It's okay, sorry. I lost.
Well,
Oh, the
sorry.
other thing was, it's okay, the benefits. So if we are paying them above and beyond, there's a benefits piece that goes with it, because in most cases, those paraeducators are filling in, don't make that rate. And so if they want the higher rate, they have to clock out, and they can't serve both. They have to be doing additional above and beyond what their normal responsibilities are. And we talked about it, and we don't want them to lose their benefits. We can't afford to have them lose their benefits. So again, this is an ongoing discussion. I think the latest email trail with superintendents transpired maybe Thursday when we went back and forth. The question was, are you paying your people above and beyond? And then it was, are you paying your people dual modalities? If so, how much and how? Many of the superintendents hadn't gone down that road, but some said, I'm paying them this amount, I'm paying them by semester, I'm paying them. So there are different ways in which it's being done. But I hear you, and I recognize and we understand that our people are more than that. And we're just trying to do everything we can to lessen that load. And so I was very appreciative of our teachers forum for sharing that information. When I have conversations with them, I learn so much. And that's our opportunity to hear them and to make those adjustments, because they are the teacher leaders in their building.
I have 2 more questions.
Yes, Dr.
Yes, Madam Superintendent, I appreciate the job the teachers that they do. However, I'm just of the mindset that everybody in the district is important, from the district all the way down to, and you've heard me say this many times, to the custodians, every employee who goes above and beyond need to be compensated. And that's my thoughts on that. My next question is, can you tell me or elaborate or maybe help me understand, because I saw some concerns in regards to one child may be affected positive or whatever, and the whole entire class go home. Can you kind of explain that for clarification, because I saw a number of that in the report.
Sure. If we refer back to the presentation that I did last board meeting, I gave scenarios and I gave information in terms of how the process unfolds. We have children who are in classrooms where when they begin to do the contact tracing, our principals are doing contact tracing with our nurses, everybody's coming together. And what I can say, the positive pieces of the pandemic, and please don't take this wrong, is the fact that everybody's working together. And so when we begin to do the contact tracing, we look at seating charts to see who's sitting next to who. We look to see who is in what class, when, where, and how. And sometimes it does warrant an entire class being quarantined because we don't know who's been next to who. And if they've been within 3 feet, within 15 minutes, we have to follow those guidelines. We don't have to because they're guidelines, but we have to adhere to at least the recommendations that are given to us to safeguard that learning environment. And so I did have Ms. Devine, because I did the nurses presentation last week when I did it, and I'm not a nurse by any stretch of the imagination. But Ms. Devine, did you hear that question about why you were quarantining whole classes when those situations were brought forward? We also had to quarantine buses when we have phys ed classes, and I shared with the board, I'm sorry, Ms. Devine, I shared with the board also additional strategies, as I promised, that I gleaned from our principals, some of which I didn't know they had done, which also goes back to the teacher schedule. We have principals who've adjusted lunch shifts. If they had 2, they've now expanded it to 3 so that they can separate the kids. When they have phys ed classes, they're putting them in quads and they're rotating throughout the gymnasium. We have principals who've changed the entrances to students coming in the building with the drop-off and the bus utilization. We have principals who've recorded for related arts. They've recorded the lessons for kids so that they are staying in cohorts or clusters for an entire week, and then the next week the kids go in person. So they've done so many different creative things in ways to help mitigate the spread, but sometimes it's not enough. And so when we do the contact tracing and we find that children don't have masks on, or the language that was utilized at one point in time in a CDC guidance document or in the document that says K through 12, and I would encourage us all to be familiar with it. It is the guidance document that helps with the reopening of schools K through 12. In there, it talks about students properly wearing masks. And so when we go around buildings, you will, not even just in buildings, in stores, you will see people not wearing masks appropriately. It'll be under the nose, under the chin, and I believe at one of the board meetings, I also did it. I popped it off just for a second just to breathe. I will publicly say it. I have an underlying health condition. I'm asthmatic. If I keep this on too long, I'm going to begin to cough. If I take it off, I try to go outside or go in an environment where nobody else is around, but our little people don't do that. They're going to take that mask off and cough, whether they have asthma, whether they have bronchitis, and some of them may have COVID. Depending on the environments they're in, we work collectively with the teachers, we work with the kids to identify who they've been in close contact with, and that's why it's landed in the space where whole classes have been quarantined. Ms. Devine, did I miss anything? I don't want you on here all evening and then don't use you.
I don't think so. I think I've heard most of what you said. And just to kind of reiterate what you were saying, Dr. Martinoff, it's based on the individual circumstances, and we take time when we're doing contact tracing to look at each situation that's before us at the time. So in some cases, if we can narrow it down, then we certainly do. It's not our goal to continue to quarantine entire classes. If we can rule out, then we will, and we do. If we can't, and it just kind of is based on different variables of grade levels, activities during the day, in some of the middle and high schools, it becomes challenging just because they're changing classes, so it may, up the numbers that way. If one positive student has been in several different areas of the building during the day. But there have been some mitigating strategies that have been put into place, and to our best of our ability, we follow the guidelines, and if we can't rule it out, then we have to rule them in. That's just kind of about the rule of thumb that we're going by.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nurse Divine.
My last question, Dr. Martin Knox. And I know you did touch bases with this board one time before in regards to when the kids go out on quarantine. I know you mentioned something about Schoology, they're getting Schoology or something, so can you kind of touch bases on that for my clarification again?
I sure can. Actually, Dr. Laws or Dr. McLeod, can one of you address Dr. McGaney's question about when students are out, what the expectations are in terms of the delivery of work for those individuals, if you don't mind, or Dr. Hafner?
Yes, ma'am, I can offer some feedback to that. If teachers are, if the whole class is not quarantined and it's only a portion of the class is quarantined, the expectation is that the teacher will post assignments in Google or Schoology. And if all the class is quarantined and the teacher is not ill herself, she's able to teach from home, he or she is able to teach from home. So they can offer the assignments synchronously and the instructions from home or in the school building if they've been vaccinated and they don't have to quarantine themselves. There are the virtual learning option, which Dr. Laws spoken to a multitude of times, but they definitely should be receiving assignments and or direct instruction depending on the scenario in their classroom or building.
Thank you so much, Dr.
And I will say, excuse me, I want to take my mask off, I'm sorry. What I've been saying is that there is nothing that takes the place of a teacher in the presence of a child. Nothing.
Correct.
And so there's so many different scenarios that we've experienced and that we've been exposed to. Prior to the year beginning, some of our adults had to be quarantined. When the first week began, there were classes that were quarantined, so that prevented teachers from being able to inform children of the change to Schoology. So there needed to be training for the kids. Some of us were a little further ahead because we didn't have that disruption that early on in the year. So instead of locking us down to say only use Schoology or only use Google, that posed a problem or would have posed a problem. The other piece that has occurred is we have a teacher who's gone out for 10 days. In the normal world or in the normal space, teachers have substitute plans that they usually give to a substitute to try to carry through when they're absent, right? A substitute can't teach a lesson like a teacher can teach a lesson unless they're certified teachers.
Correct.
But we've had teachers who've gone out for quarantine and then became positive. They may have planned for those 10 days, but never anticipated being out for another 10 to 14 days. And so in those cases, that's when we begin to utilize our resources that we have, that we've invested in, such as APEX, or seeing if we even have other teachers who can provide a lesson to those students while in the building. So there's a lot of shifting that has occurred in the way in which we do things. But what I will continue to say is if there's a specific case or a specific school or a specific teacher, you know, we have these scenarios that are shared, but the specifics aren't always given for us to be able to go specifically to that individual to say, I need your lessons posted. You need to make, or what support do you need? Back to what you said earlier, what support do you need? How can I better help you and better support you? We don't usually know until after. And so we are working again very closely with our teachers. And one of the teachers in the PAC group said the other day, I'm working hard. And so there may have been a time where my dittos didn't come out right, but it wasn't intentional. But if I knew, I would have been able to go back and make adjustments. And it wasn't tag, it was just a conversation. But I need to make sure that we understand that we are in this together. We're trying to do the best we can with what we have in the circumstances and the situations that we're encountering. And so while nobody's perfect, if we are aware, that's how we make adjustments. And that's why it was so important for me to have, again, the continuous conversation with our TAC group, so I can hear. And when I go in schools and I visit, I have the conversation with the teachers. Tell me how things are going. But we continue to listen, we continue to make adjustments, and we continue to learn from one another to continue to grow.
Thank you.
Okay, we will hear from Brian and then we will move on. Oh, you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up there. Was there any other hand up with Brian, Dr. Baker next?
All right.
Okay,
Uh,
Brian first.
Brian first, all right.
Okay.
In the event that a parent or a child is aware that there is not any instruction available for them, is the best mode of contact to contact the school? Or who's like, should the parent or the student contact the school to say that they don't have any lessons, or should they be contacting Dr. Laws or someone in the Department of Academics? Like, can that be shared with the public of how?
So if there's an issue with the work, the teacher is the first point of contact. If the teacher is not available or there, it's the leaders in the building. But I don't want to block anybody to say that's the only person you're supposed to go to. We're all here, and we will guide and direct an individual to the appropriate staff to resolve an issue.
And just to follow up on that, if there's issues with Schoology or the Google Classroom platform, who should parents or students contact in that situation?
So it varies, again, but usually Dr. Laws has been working with the virtual piece and with the Schoology piece as well. But it depends, because I was in a school a couple days ago and there was an issue with Schoology and I was the point of contact at that time. And so I kind of helped navigate through that situation, just being familiar with Schoology because I used it prior to my getting here. So I was able to help with that situation. But then I also wanted to make sure that I was accurate. So I called Dr. Laws, and again, I eliminated that passing someone on. I addressed the issue while I was there. But for virtual or for Schoology, it would be Dr. Laws.
Okay. Now, Dr. Baker.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first two are for Ms. Addison, and the second one is for Ms. Devine.
Ms. Addison's gone.
Ms. Addison's gone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, maybe you can answer this for me then. You sent in your superintendent's briefing a list with numbers of students by school of the ones that have been quarantined and never returned. And then over in the next column, it was the number present on 9/13. Did that number represent the enrollment for that school, or was that just the number that was present that on 9/13/21?
It should have been, but I can defend it, it should have been the number that was present that day, because that was the daily attendance for that.
All right, so that would not necessarily have been the enrollment for
No,
that
sir.
school. And the second question, I know last year, we suspended, or the state suspended, truancy, taking kids to court for non-attendance or violation of attendance. Has that been reinstated for this school year?
So they didn't necessarily suspend it. When it got to court, they were so backed up with other things and with the pandemic, they weren't hearing those cases, and they asked us to, they kind of like dismiss some of the cases. The approach that I have for the district and for our community is to have a more proactive approach as opposed to reactive and disciplinary, because the first thing we need to do is to find out why our children aren't coming to school. Whether it's a homeless situation, whether it's some other factors that are getting in the way. And then when we put supports and resources in places for our family, then there's an accountability piece if children still aren't coming to school. But I will say that there are some cases now where we have parents who have said they are not sending their children to school until we either mandate masks or unless we have a virtual option for the entire district. So again, trying to work with those parents to safeguard our children while also making sure they are academically challenged. That's where we are, but we still will hold individuals accountable for not coming to school. But it's gotta be the support, from my perspective, the support before the discipline.
So at this point, we haven't carried any folks to court for truancy?
No, we have not.
Okay. And when would we determine that we've exhausted all the efforts of support?
When we start using that definition of absenteeism, when the child is 10%, that's when we have issue. Yes, sir.
And the other question was for Ms. Devine, but you can probably answer that.
I'm not the nurse.
No, you, the nurse, the chief bottle washer, everything else, you boss. Like those kids that we quarantined and they never returned, does the nurse or somebody follow up on those children from a medical standpoint, or is there any intervention there from the district level through our medical folks or nurses or?
Some of the work. somebody.
Or a social worker, somebody.
So it's both. So Ms. Addison has been making personal contact with those individuals as well, and she's been working very closely with the attendance clerks in the school to make sure we're reaching out and doing every effort we can to make sure we're trying to get in touch with parents. So yes, they've been reaching out to those students, and some of the students may have gone out for quarantine and then became positive, so they're out for another 10 to some odd days, and we won't know until they actually return with their doctor's slip or return to share. I went to superintendent's meeting with my colleagues in the Midlands area, and some of the challenges that I never anticipated was that one of the superintendents shared that parents aren't telling them that the children are positive, and so they're out, and they just don't know. We are fortunate because, as far as I know, our parents are reporting to us what's happening with our children, so we can gauge, once that phone call is made, and they're communicating with our parents. If children were out for 10 days prior to and then out for another continuous, in most cases they are positive at that point. So it has a major impact on our children in the learning environment. Ms. Devine, did you want to add anything to that in terms of children returning or things that you may have seen or heard through this work?
Yes, I do want to stress that whenever we are speaking with the parents for a child that's positive and explaining like their 10-day isolation period, we always stress that if their child is not well on day 10, that we encourage them to communicate that with their primary healthcare provider so that they can be followed up on, because a mild to moderate illness, they should be improved by day 10 and ready to come back. But if they're not, then we always stress to please, let us know, so that we can get involved, because obviously, Dr. Recker, my heart in that area of the following up and making sure that they're not falling between a crack or not getting something that they need is certainly of utmost priority for us. So in a way to try to capture it, we make sure that we, give that information on the front end in hopes that we will hear, and get some feedback from the parents. We also have a communication between the nursing staff and attendance. And so attendance is aware of, when students are out on quarantine or isolation, there's some sharing of information there so that everybody's on the same page. And so if one knows something, then we can alert the other. Attendance is aware of something, then they can alert the nurse. So that has worked well.
Nurse Devine, can you do one more thing for me? And I think there were concerns, there were concerns about students who were quarantined and a family member in the home was positive, because there's concerns about children being out 10 days for quarantine and then another 10 days beyond that individual who was originally positive. So again, that same window that we just talked about with children. Can you talk about the family quarantine piece for me, please?
Yes. So the way that quarantine is determined is based on the last day of potential exposure to the virus. So if a child is in a classroom setting and they're exposed to their classmate that was positive, the positive classmate is sent home to isolate, and the classmate that was exposed is sent home for quarantine, and they don't have contact with each other after that day. So they're both out, one's getting over their illness and one we're waiting to see if it's going to show up. And so in a household, it depends on the individual household situations, and that's part of what we do whenever we are having dialogue with the parents. If a member in the household is positive and the other members in the house cannot be separated from that positive person in the house, each day of that 10 days of isolation for the positive person is a potential day of exposure to the household members. So we have to get all the way through the 10 days of isolation, and then after the 10th day, if they've improved, the positive person, according to CDC, if they had mild to moderate illness, by day 11, their viral load should have waned or weakened to the point that they're not contagious to others at that point. So what we do is we have to base it on the last day of potential exposure to the virus. And so in a household, when they cannot be separated from each other, then each day is a potential day of exposure. And so that's how it appears that it's an automatic household 20 days, but it's all based on when is the last day that they are potentially exposed to the virus. And that can vary if we have, say, older children that are able to be what we call isolated away and have, a setup in the household where they're separated, they have separate bathrooms, separate bedrooms, and they're able to work that out, then we try to work with those families. If you have minor children and they're positive, or you have positive parents of minor children, obviously that is not an option unless the positive person is completely removed from the household. So it just kind of depends on the situations, but that's how we come up with what we call household close contact quarantine periods.
I'm finished asking questions for nurse.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for the very beneficial discussion that we entered into. And if that's all the questions, we are almost down to, as far as the agenda is concerned, it now calls for executive session. And we as trustees are supposed to be entering into executive session. And in entering into the executive session, we want to invite our in-person guests, and we don't have any in-person guests tonight, other than Bruce. I'm going to get Bruce is here, as well as our online viewers, to join us when we return to open session. However, there is no designated time as to how long it's going to take for executive session to last. If you are unable to be with us at that time, please continue to be safe and have a pleasant week. Is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we enter into executive session for the receipt of legal advice, where the legal advice relates to pending, threatened, or potential claims, discussion of negotiation, incidents of proposed contractual arrangements, and discussion of negotiation incident to propose property contractual matters.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and second. Is there any discussion? If not, we are entering into executive session for receipt of, well, a motion has been made and seconded that we enter into executive session for receipt of legal advice, where the legal advice relates to pending, threatened, or potential claims, discussion of negotiation incidents to propose contractual arrangement, and discussion of negotiation incident to the proposed property contractual matter. Are there any discussions? Please cast your vote.
Passed. We're now in executive session. Do you want to read the statement before we go into that room?
Do you want to make sure RP is discontinued?
Yeah, I'm going to. She's just going to read a statement right now.
Okay. Since we have Ms. Mills joining us remotely.
Hold on just a second. I need to let her back and put everyone else. I'm sorry. That's my bad. I need to put people back up there.
We're gonna stay in this room, though.
No, we're gonna go in the other room. I'll do it.
That's what they said. I said, let's make it.
Do I need to?
All right.
You leaving?
Yeah,
I'm gonna be leaving.
Bill is not going to participate in executive session.
Are you leaving for,
Well, do I need to hear this statement?
No, she's not going to participate.
I didn't know. I need to talk to Shelley, but yeah, y'all can stay in here. This, Amy, this is on YouTube, right?
it is?
Okay.
Yes.
Even though
I'm sorry, say it again.
Super Pro, Super Pro, RP is not here.
He's working, he is on, he's remote doing it.
Oh, okay.
We have to make sure it's off, so, and I don't know if it's off.
So I'll be able to.
Cast your vote.
Motion passes.
The motion passes. Okay, 7.3.
Madam Chairwoman, I move to postpone the vote for the RFP for organization analysis, job classification, and salary study solicitation.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made to postpone the RFP. And that didn't
For
get
organizational analysis,
for organizational analysis until.
job
Job
classification.
classification and
Okay,
salary
organizational
studies.
job, analysis, job classification, and salary study solicitation. Is there any discussion? Hearing none?
Did we
Please
get a
cast.
second?
Oh, you didn't get a second?
It was
Gang
Gang
second.
Again, you did.
Sorry, I did not hear it.
Yeah, okay, there's no discussion, so please cast your vote.
Okay, it passes.
The motion passes. Okay, 7.4, mask mandate for Sumter School District due to the emergency nature of COVID-19. Trustee, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the Sumter School District Board of Trustees implement a temporary mask mandate for all staff and students beginning Wednesday, September 29th through Wednesday, October 13th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and second to approve the emergency mask that mandate for Sumter School District due to emergency nature of COVID-19 for September 29th through October 13th, 2021. Is there any discussion? Okay, please cast your vote.
That motion failed.
The motion fails. Okay. We're now down to approval of the consent agenda. The minutes from the September 13th meeting, and the consent agenda is approved with the corrections as noted. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. All right, as we bring this meeting to a close, I cannot stress enough the importance of practicing safety protocols for yourself, those you love, and those you come in contact with during these difficult times we're facing. Thank you for being with us this evening and for your continuing with us on your powerful. Please know that we appreciate each and every one of you. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 10:46 p.m.